Have you been burning yourself out for God and wondering why it isn't working? You serve every Sunday. You lead the small group. You say yes every time someone needs help. You pour yourself into the church, into the ministry, into the mission, and somewhere along the way, the thing that was supposed to fill you started draining you instead. You're doing everything right, and yet you feel like you're running on fumes. The prayer feels mechanical. The Bible feels dry. And the worst part is the guilt because you love God, and you can't understand why doing all of this for Him leaves you feeling so completely empty. What if the burnout you're feeling right now isn't a sign that you need to push harder, but a signal that you've been operating from the wrong source entirely? What if God never asked you to generate all of this on your own, and the exhaustion you feel is actually the most honest prayer you've prayed in months? Everything is about to make sense. Because today we're going inside Psalm 46, one of the most misread chapters in the entire Bible, and we're going to find the two words God spoke directly to burned-out believers like you. Two words that have the power to change the entire atmosphere of your life, starting today. The two words are simply this: be still, not try harder, not do more, not push through. Be still. In the original Hebrew, the word translated as be still is the word rapha, and it means to let go, to release, to stop straining, to sink into rest. It carries the image of hands that were clenched finally opening, a body that was rigid finally relaxing, a person who was running finally stopping and just breathing. God isn't asking you to do less for Him. He's asking you to stop trying to be Him, to stop generating the very life that only He can provide. Before we go deeper into what Psalm 46 is actually saying, let's take an honest look at what Christian burnout feels like from the inside, because most people who are burned out don't even recognize it. They just think they're failing. The first sign is that serving God starts to feel like a second job. What used to feel like a calling now feels like an obligation. You show up, you do the work, you smile, but inside you're counting down to when it's over. The second sign is that your prayers start to feel like voicemails. You talk, but it feels like nothing is on the other end. The connection that used to feel real now feels like you're speaking into silence. The third sign is resentment, quiet, guilty resentment toward the very things you once loved. The ministry, the people, the church. You resent them, and then you feel ashamed for resenting them, and that shame makes the burnout worse. And the fourth sign is the performance spiral, where you feel guilty for being burned out, so you try to do more to fix it, which burns you out more, which makes you feel more guilty, and the cycle never stops. Here's the question nobody asks: how does a person who loves God end up burned out because of God? The answer is simpler than you think. Somewhere along the way, you started measuring your worth as a Christian by your output, by how much you served, by how often you showed up, by how spiritually productive you were. And the church, often without meaning to reinforce that message. The people who got recognized were the ones who did the most. The people who got leadership roles were the ones who gave the most. And slowly, without realizing it, your relationship with God stopped being a love story and started being a performance review. You weren't connecting with God anymore. You were performing for Him. And you can only perform for so long before the stage collapses under you. Now, let's go to Psalm 46 and understand why God chose this exact moment to say, "Be still." The psalm was written in a time of absolute chaos. Nations were in uproar. Kingdoms were falling. The earth itself was described as giving way, with mountains crashing into the sea. This wasn't a peaceful Sunday morning. This was the kind of crisis where every human instinct screams, do something, fix something, move faster, work harder, fight back. And in the middle of all of that, the fire, the desolation, the wars at the end of the earth, God speaks. And what He says is not, "Here is my battle plan." What He says is not, "Here is your assignment." He says, "Be still and know that I am God." The stillness isn't for when everything is calm. The stillness is the answer to the chaos. Think about a fire extinguisher. When a fire breaks out, the worst thing you can do is run around in a panic, because panic spreads the fire faster. The first thing they train firefighters to do is stop, assess, and then act with precision. Your spiritual life works the same way. When the pressure builds, when the demands multiply, when the guilt piles on, when the burnout hits, the instinct is to run faster, do more, fix it through activity. But God is saying, stop, assess. Let me show you what's actually happening. Because here's what's really going on when you're burned out for God. You haven't been doing too little. You've been drawing from the wrong well. You've been trying to serve God out of your own strength instead of from His, and a well that you're filling yourself will always run dry. The only well that never runs dry is the one you let Him fill. Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. Now read the second half of that sentence, because most people stop at be still and miss the whole point. Know that I am God. Not know that you need to be better. Not know that you need to try harder. Know that I am God, which means you are not. This is the revelation that changes everything. You have been burning out because somewhere deep down you have been acting as if the whole thing depends on you, as if your effort is what keeps the ministry alive, as if your service is what holds the church together, as if your performance is what makes God stay. But God is saying, be still, stop striving, and remember who I am, because when you truly know that He is God and you are not, the weight you've been carrying lifts, not because the work disappears, but because you finally stop trying to do His job. So what does be still actually look like in a real life that's already full and exhausted? It starts with 3 practical shifts, and the first one is what I call the output to overflow switch. Right now, most of what you're doing for God is coming from output from your own reserves, your own willpower, your own emotional energy. The shift is learning to serve only from overflow, meaning you only give out what God has already poured in. This means before you serve, you receive. Before you give, you fill. It doesn't mean serving less. It means never serving from an empty place. A practical way to start. Before you walk into any ministry commitment this week, spend 5 minutes just receiving from God, not asking, not interceding, just being still and letting Him fill you. You'll be shocked at how different it feels to serve from a full place versus a drained one. The second shift is the assignment to calling switch. When you're burned out, every request feels like a command, and every no feels like a sin. The shift is learning to tell the difference between what God is actually calling you to do and what people or your own guilt are assigning you to do. Jesus Himself withdrew from the crowds regularly, even when people still needed Him, even when there was more to do, because He knew that His assignment came from the Father and not from the need in front of Him. One helpful question to ask before saying yes to anything new in ministry: is this God asking me, or is this guilt asking me? Because guilt is a terrible ministry director. It will always say yes. It will always add more, and it will always burn you out because it was never designed to lead you. Only God's voice was. The third shift is the doing to being switch, and this is the hardest one for burned out Christians, because we've been trained to believe that our value to God is in what we do. The shift is learning to just be with God, not to get something from Him, not to intercede for someone, not to study something or prepare something or produce something, just to be. To sit in His presence the way a child sits with a parent on a Sunday afternoon, not because they need something, but just because they want to be near them. This is what be still and know that I am God is really about. It's not a strategy. It's not a technique. It's a relationship. And you cannot sustain a relationship where one person is always performing and the other is always watching. At some point, you have to just be together. That's where the burnout ends, not in better strategies, but in simpler presence. When you start to practice stillness, when you make the shift from output to overflow, from assignment to calling, from doing to being, something begins to change in you that no amount of striving could have produced. The serving that used to drain you starts to energize you, because you're no longer doing it from obligation, but from genuine love. The prayer that used to feel like a voicemail starts to feel like a real conversation because you've stopped trying to perform it and started simply showing up. The Bible that used to feel like homework starts to read like a letter from someone who actually knows you and loves you completely. And the guilt, the constant, exhausting guilt that you're never doing enough, begins to quiet down because you've stopped trying to earn a love that was already yours. You stop burning out for God and start being filled by Him. And from that fullness, everything you do carries a different weight, not the weight of obligation, but the lightness of overflow. So here is the truth you can carry with you today. God did not design you to be a machine that produces for His kingdom. He designed you to be a child who rests in His presence and serves from that rest. The burnout you're feeling is not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you've been carrying something that was never yours to carry alone. You were never meant to sustain the ministry. You were never meant to hold the church together. You were never meant to keep the mission running on your own energy. He is God and you are not. And the moment you truly rest in that truth, the weight lifts, the joy returns, and the service becomes what it was always meant to be. Not a burden that breaks you, but an overflow of a love that fills you. Stop burning out for God. Start being still with Him. Because everything that truly matters flows from that place of stillness, and not a single thing of eternal value has ever been built on human exhaustion. If this message found you at exactly the right moment, if something in these words spoke to a place inside you that has been exhausted for longer than you want to admit, don't just keep scrolling. Go to the comments right now and type, "I choose stillness over striving." By writing those words, you are making a declaration to your own heart that the burnout stops here and the stillness begins. And if you know someone who is burning out for God right now, someone who loves Him deeply but is running on empty, someone who is doing everything right and still feeling everything wrong, share this with them. It might be exactly what they needed to hear today. And if you want more of these simple, honest, life-shifting biblical truths delivered straight to your feed every week, subscribe to Faith Plainly. Because the truth was never meant to be complicated, and rest was never meant to be earned. I'll see you in the next one.